Putin bad news. This chilling warning from Ukraine to Tony Blair about Putin was issued 2 decades before the invasion. 2 decades before Russia's invasion, Tony Blair received a chilling warning, according to newly released government documents. Ukraine feared the West was nurturing too rosy a view of Vladimir Putin. Documents recently released by the Ukrainian government show that they had grave concerns about the relationship with Russia, even as the Labour Prime Minister argued that Mr. Putin should be given a seat at the international top table, after being the first Western leader to visit him in Moscow. Documents reveal that, in addition to Mr. Blair's concerns about Silvio Berlusconi of Italy and admiring letters from Margaret Thatcher to the Labour Prime Minister, he was urged by aides not to snuff out Kyiv's aspirations to join the EU. They argued that, should Ukraine join the EU, it would form a formidable barrier to Russian imperialism. After talks in Crimea in July 2001, Britain's ambassador to Kyiv, Roland Smith, warned Mr. Blair that British proposals for Ukraine, Moldova, and Belarus to receive special neighbour status risked giving the impression of setting a final eastern EU boundary and excluding countries that were deemed to be on the wrong side. Noting that Foreign Secretary Jack Straw's proposals seemed to rule out full membership for these countries, he questioned whether this was because of the belief that they were incurably infected with the Soviet mentality, or that Ukraine ought to go back to Russia where she belongs. Ukraine's president, Leonid Kuchma, added a handwritten postscript to Mr. Blair saying he pinned great hopes on your personal support in this exceptionally important issue, contrasting these worries with the country's desperate hopes of realizing its European vocation. Later, Mr. Blair's main advisor on the matter, Roger Little, bemoaned to the PM that, the Ukrainians want to build a special relationship with us, if only we would show more interest. The Ukrainian delegation was in a glum mood when Mr. Little met with them again in December at Chevening, the Foreign Secretary's grace and favor mansion. During a conversation with Mr. Blair, he said, "We have too rosy a view of Putin, who, according to them, is a clever, presentable power politician, but no democratic hero. Furthermore, we insult Ukraine." Foreign policy disagreements between Russia and Britain and the West have become increasingly bitter and suspicious, despite the PM's hopes for a new era of integration with Moscow under Mr. Putin's rule. After Putin illegally annexed Crimea in 2014, the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, has been pushing for Ukraine to join the European Union and North Atlantic Treaty Organization. But this month, Mr. Zelensky left a summit of the military alliance in Vilnius with only hazy promises of future membership, disappointing Ukrainians once again. Documents turned over to the National Archives this week reveal that, despite risking controversy to court Mr. Putin 2 decades ago, even in the face of Russia's brutal war in Chechnya, Mr. Blair was desperate to avoid accusations in the British press that he was snuggling up to Italy's Berlusconi. Documents suggest that there was worry in Number 10 about how to portray a planned summit in Rome, despite Mr. Blair's handwritten note to his aides saying that the Eurosceptic Italian Prime Minister was a essential ally against France and Germany in their ambitions for a more integrated EU. In an effort to downplay the meeting in British media, Downing Street, unusually, decided not to allow lobby journalists to travel with Mr. Blair, as noted by David Winray in the Foreign Office, who remarked, "We will want to avoid Blair snuggles up to Berlusconi" headlines. The summit in February 2002 occurred at a time when Berlusconi, who passed away earlier this year, was facing new allegations of corruption and had recently made headlines for comments he made about the superiority of Western civilization. When the Italian currency was replaced by the euro in 2000, Berlusconi spent 50 billion lire, then £15.5 million, on legal fees alone, but Britain's ambassador, Sir John Shepherd, briefed Number 10 that there was a real opportunity for the two men to work together. He'll go to great lengths, despite his claim that he hasn't spent any money yet, to keep his Houdini-like escape skills intact. Sir John wrote, "This is a war he must win." To paraphrase, even if he does come a cropper for whatever reason, We have at least in the short term a real opportunity to exploit and form his government's orientations in Europe in support of UK interests, holding our noses and staying alert to the risks as we do so. Also revealed in the documents is Mr. Blair's private and heartfelt praise from former Tory and Lib Dem leaders Margaret Thatcher and Paddy Ashdown for his support for Washington in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. Thatcher praised her opponent's determination, writing, "I greatly admire the resolve you are showing," in a letter dated April 4, 2002. "You've made it so the world knows Britain is on the side of freedom and America. That's the best possible image for our country." Her closing signature read, "With all good wishes, Margaret T." Meanwhile, Mr. Ashdown emailed his former opponent, saying, "Heavens, what a wonderful speech. What the country absolutely required. It will have intimidated your foes, impressed your allies, and reassured your skeptics." In addition, Sir John Stanley, the Tory defence minister at the time, wrote to Mr. Blair days after 9/11, warning him that a terror attack in the UK involving WMD was imminent and that preparation was necessary. "I want to urge your government very strongly that it bases its security, civil defense, and intelligence's resourcing and deployment policies on the assumption that a terrorist WMD attack on one or more of the centers of population in the UK will be attempted in the near and foreseeable future. I fear that the British public, especially in urban areas, is far too exposed to the possibility of a terrorist attack." Mr. Blair responded that despite sharing Sir John's concerns and ordering a security review, a conventional attack remained the greatest threat.